Oh, actually, let me do the disclaimer. This is being recorded. Just make sure that everyone got that on record. So, Rob, what a big day.
Incredible day.
So, I was thinking today, we'll get into backstory a little bit about us working together, but do you remember the dream crushing conversation that we had early on about writing your book, about writing any memoir or biography about I didn't prep you for this question. I was just thinking about it just now.
It's okay. We've had many a dream crushing conversations, Rhonda, when we first started this project.
Yeah. Tell people out there a little bit. Well, maybe I'll prep. The, this is a conversation I have with all clients working on family histories and memoirs.
Yeah.
And it goes something like this. Rob, your story is amazing and it's important and it needs to be told,
Yeah.
and no one is going to buy
Okay.
it. And that's just the reality with most memoirs and family histories, that there's not a lot of market for. It's a tough market. And so we had to hold that in balance the entire time you were working on it, knowing what did you keep saying about it being worth it?
Oh, it's been so worth it because the whole journey, it's not about, thinking about the final product. That's not what this is about. It's about the journey and it's about self-discovery. The most beautiful part for me, because this was a near-death experience, a lot of tragedy, a lot of medical issues, my special needs daughter, all of these things were very difficult to relive. But at the same time, I found that to be very cathartic. I found that when I wrote these things, it's like, kind of getting poison out of the body. And I learned a lot about myself in the process. So it's the journey, as difficult as it is, that's the beauty of it. And every time that I had a big block or I got scared or I was afraid to write it, besides you telling me, I'm not doing it for you, so get back to work, um, then, I said to myself, well, I'm going to detach myself, detach the ego from the process, just learn to enjoy the ride, let it come out of me. And that helped me so many times throughout the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting paradox, this idea that we wanted it to be great and worthy of the story. And so you have to hold the idea that maybe someone will read it and prepare yourself that maybe no one will.
That's exactly right. Yeah. You have to do it for yourself, just like exercise or anything else, it's got to be something that drives you, that you have to get out of you, that you have to express, you have to tell. But if you worry about, am I going to make any money on this, or where's this thing going to go? I think that serves as a block.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happened today?
Oh my goodness gracious. Today, now what I have to say, Rhonda, today was miraculous in its own right, but the backstory is that it's been a tremendous amount of work. This social media thing, you and I, from the day we met, even in that Richard Paul Evans group, everybody said, oh, this is the exciting part, the marketing part. That's the part that I have a lot of disdain for. I don't like it. I'm not good at it. I'm not comfortable with it. So I was really blessed to have a great team that I hired to help me do it. Because I would write the blogs and provide the pictures and do those things, but this whole posting and all these crazy things I'm not very good at. So this has been going on. This has been building. We've been building this momentum for about 4 or 5 months now, and it all culminated today. Just beautifully. I couldn't even be more pleased. So out of the 10 categories that Amazon allows you to put your book in 8 of them so far, the last time I checked with my publisher, we've reached number 1 in those categories. It's just like phenomenal to think about it. And then we have 2 more categories to go, but in 2 of those categories, which are really difficult, it's Christian faith living, but I'm right under Max Lucado and C.S. Lewis. So I don't think I'm going to be able to knock those two guys off, but just to be able to get to that place has just been incredibly humbling and exciting and emotional and wonderful all at the same time. It's been great.
I've been so touched to watch the outpouring on social media, all the support coming from everywhere for
Yeah.
you and this story. People are so invested. There were thousands of people praying for you when you were going through the most difficult times, and they all are still pulling for you. And I could see that on social media.
Yeah, no question. But Rhonda, I think that that my daughter Maria, being in the condition that she's in, and putting her out there, and you and I talked about that early on, by the way, putting Maria out there in a way that someone didn't think that I was using her as leverage in any way, but putting her out there in an authentic way, because I don't want anyone to have pity on her, because she's this beautiful spiritual being that um, you know God speaks through all the time, and me, and she's been one of the reasons that drove me so hard to get the story out. So to put things out there, and it's a lesson of authenticity, I think, for everyone, because when you're authentic and you come from that authentic place, I think that people can see it, they can recognize it. And today, when we live in this fake world of social media, we don't even know who's real anymore. All this technology is creating people that don't even exist. It's important, I think, to be authentic more than anything now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you just are. There's no, you can't be anything else. It's you are authentic to the core. And anyone who reads your story will see the raw, brave honesty when you were going through it. Some of those moments that were not especially proud of and not excited to share, and you shared it anyway.
Yeah. I remember, Rhonda, you and I having conversations about those moments. And if you'll remember, I wanted to chop some of those out because I was concerned that I work in a very conservative business. I'm in the steel industry. It's a very conservative, mature industry, and well, I didn't know how people, my friends and colleagues, were going to react to those, and I still don't. However, from those that I have shared the Facebook posts with and some of the social media content, I was delighted to see that they really connected with it. You never really know what's behind someone and their life experiences, which is why judging is so hard on other people, because these people, everyone has something they're going through. And I'm certainly not special that I had a heart transplant and I have a special needs child, because there are people that have adversity and vicissitudes and things that they deal with that put mine to shame. So, but it's lovely to see people. I don't think I've had anyone, and now we're up to 18,000 reactions on Facebook and Instagram. People that are sharing posts, and nobody has come to me and said, hey, you're using your daughter in a horrible way, or this is garbage, or so it's been great.
It also takes a lot of courage to talk about spirituality and God. I mean, you have to wonder, will people believe you? And I know you wondered that.
I did wonder that, because, and I didn't want to come off as, and by the way, before I get into that, I've had a lot of, I've been blessed with a lot of, like I call strangers and coincidences, pastors and strangers on planes, and because how extensively I've traveled. And these are all characters that have played a very important role in my life and understanding different belief systems, like all of the different doctors that worked on me to help save me. There's a chapter in the book, as you know, called All One. And I get into, because I was raised in a very traditional Catholic family. My parents were Italian immigrants. And, we had, much like most, religions do, very strict rules to follow. And this is what you believe. And anyone who believes outside that, you know, doesn't fit into your belief system. But having gone through this journey and experiencing all these different belief systems, Sikhs and Muslims and Jews and Hindus and Christians, and they're all beautiful, magnificent people who have showed me that everyone has value and everybody's belief system should be cherished because they're on their own path. As long as their moral compass is going in the right direction, who are we to say what they should or shouldn't believe? You know.
We've talked about this, and I've personally long believed that maybe God put some of those amazing doctors in your path of all the different backgrounds: Dr. Uriel, Dr. Juvenendum, Dr. Carson, Dr. Patel, uh,
Yeah.
your bosses from China, so many people of every background and religion in your path
Yes.
to really teach us that message of unity in all one.
Yes. Yes. And I have to say that part of my writing process, and I'd like to touch on this just a little bit, because what I did, and this was something that I actually concealed for a while because you never know how people are going to take this, but honestly, for me, having had the near-death experience that I had and what I saw, it was important to me every morning to go through a prayer and meditation routine. And for me personally, I would pray to Spirit, the Holy Spirit, to speak through me and not from me. So those words would be pure. And there were times when, as you know, Rhonda, I mean, I would come up with nothing. There were times when I would sit at my desk and come up with nothing. But I found that if you show up at the same time and the same place every day and do the work, some people call it the muse, some people call it spirit. It doesn't make any difference. But it's kind of like if you want to go anywhere, you have to get in your car to drive there. So I would get in my car every morning, my little desk. I'd wake at 4:30 and go through my prayer and meditation routine. And then I would sit there with my pen. Uh, and sometimes you have to prompt it. There were tablets of pages that I just ripped up and threw away. And a lot of the times, some of the material that I would send to you, of course, there might have been 6 pages. We may have kept, a quarter of a page. But the point is that what came through me was real and authentic. And I believe that it was, spiritually driven. And that part of that process has been a part of me now that will stay with me forever, regardless of what I do. I can't break that habit. It becomes a habit.
Yeah. That was one of the really difficult things after you came back and didn't, it's not especially fun to be in this world after you've been in that place, and learning how can you possibly continue to live in spirit in this world.
Mm.
So I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because I talk about in the book, there's a chapter in the book entitled "It's Not Home Anymore." And a great deal of that chapter deals with, grappling with the incongruence between the spiritual world and the temporal world. And honestly, even knowing that I had to come back and take care of my daughter and be with my family and help support them, I didn't want to be here. Having been to that place of love and light, and where we're all connected and there's that unity and we seem to all work together in spirit, I didn't want to be back in this place. So there was a watershed moment in my journey when I was living in Chicago, because I live in North Carolina, for your viewers, and I had to go to Chicago to get my heart. And you have to stay near the hospital for a year after transplant, because if you reject, then you die, then they can lose their transplant license. So in that year of living alone, I went through a period of depression where I would get up every morning and I would actually meditate and try to get back into that ethereal space. And of course, after about 3 months, I realized the folly of that. There's no way I could gravitate, ascend. And so there was a Chinese pastor that my boss brought to see me. And he came to see me, and we sat out on the porch one day, and it was it's a beautiful moment in the book. And I told him that I actually broke down, and I told him that I had all this guilt of getting a heart, and all these people that have supported me, and I didn't want to be here anymore, and I didn't know where I belonged. And in his own Chinese way, he looked out at the street, and then he turned back to me and he said, "You know, the solution to your problem is very simple. You don't know where you belong because you have grown fat in the spirit, um, from your spiritual journey." And he said, to get thin again, you have to learn how to see the divine in everything here on earth. And that's how God will express through the divine, the gifts of the spirit, faith and humility and loving nature and seeing the divine in other people. And that was a really big moment for me, because from that point on, I went for a long walk and I began to connect with nature. I began to see things for the first time and see the divine in everything, including my daughter, and others around me. And that anchored me back into this place. And I realized that, you can spend your days wanting to go somewhere else and praying to be taken to heaven, or whatever your belief is, but you're in this body. We're spiritual beings living inside these fragile clay vessels, and we need to make the best of it here and allow spirit to express through us, by the way we love others and treat others. So it's a great part of the book.
It was a great part of the book. You you saw the divine in this world after that, but you had long seen the divine in Maria.
Yes, I
Yeah,
did.
there's some pretty poignant moments. We probably don't have time to get in. People are just going to have to read the book to see the powerful insights that came when you understood fully how perfect she is.
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
Um, well, we only have a couple more minutes. We wanted to keep this short. You know that you and I could talk for an hour, and and we, yeah, we will have to keep clipping along. I'm I'm just wondering if there are any final thoughts you want to share, maybe about getting a heart. That's something we haven't talked about yet. About any of the spiritual journey in having someone else's heart live inside you, and what that person was maybe trying to tell you and what you learned. This is a big mouthful, but
Yeah.
also what you learned about some of the most troubling aspects of society today from that part of your journey.
Okay, great. I'll try to run through that very quickly because I
Yeah.
know we don't have much time.
You've got a couple minutes. You don't have to go too quickly, but
Okay. So I won't spoil it for the readers about the identity of who's living inside me, unless you want me to. But thank you. But what I learned is when I met the donor family, which is very important, Rhonda, and I'm glad you asked the question. And when I met the donor family, I can tell you one of the coincidences was this person was born 3 months before my daughter and had an affinity for special needs children. So there's so many more coincidences that the reader will find out about in this book. But I have come to know that coincidences are simply God's way of remaining anonymous. But one of the things that I learned when I met my donor family about this person is that, we see this affliction in society now a lot, and it's through the misuse of social media. As was one of the things that drove this person to commit suicide, which was very sad, because it was a person full of life and hope and beauty, and this person got sucked into this unreal reality of social media and began to compare uh, her life with the lives of others, and found that she, through a lot of this fake reality that we see, began to feel very unworthy and unloved, and began to want to feel something, which led to a phenomenon that's unfortunately very prevalent in our society now, which young people get into this cutting thing where they cut themselves so they can feel something. Because as her best friend explained to me, when you don't feel loved, you you go numb, and you'll do anything to feel something again. And the deeper she went down into that social media tunnel, she got involved in very dark things. She started to listen to music that actually, for a young person, talked about how cool suicide was, and some of these things. So one dark moment led to another, and she just couldn't pull out of it in her mind, and it led her to taking her own life. So these are some of the things that are addressed towards the end of the book, but they're kind of warnings for our day. And it's all about getting back to that authentic place, I believe, of living, of loving one another, and leading by example. Yeah.
So I felt like that was important to bring up because it's a life-saving message potentially,
Yeah.
for people to understand. Let's end on a moment of the light, and let's talk about the nature of the power of a single act and how the light spreads, because people who are watching this are probably working on their own stories, and
Yes.
they have an opportunity through their own stories to light a candle. And so talk about that for a moment, about the light.
Sure. So I had two near-death experiences. The second one was in Chicago when my body gave out again, while waiting for a donor heart. I'm about 174 pounds. I had atrophied to about 138. And even with the experimental pump that was in my body and everything that they were doing for me, um, I kind of collapsed again right before my donor heart arrived. And I had a profound near death experience. And when I went into the ethereal and I was in that place and I saw how we were all connected through this web of lights that seemed to stretch into infinity and hang on the ceiling of the universe, I realized in that place when I became part of this interactive web of lights that each spark of light or quark of light represented a life. And while I was in that place, I realized that if I hurt myself, I hurt everything connected to me. But if I loved, that the light would spread. And I think that that example, that the web in the ethereal is really but a reflection of how we're all connected here in the temporal world on Earth. And that same rules apply. If we hurt ourselves, we hurt everything connected to us. But if we love, not only does the light spread, but we illuminate the path for others. And that's a very important thing. And that ties in with the power of a single act and how I saw that the actions that people took, a lot of the doctors, when I went and interviewed them, I should say interview, but questioned them, after I came back and was healthy again. And I asked them, do you think it was God that saved my life? And they all said yes, regardless of whatever religious belief it was. But they said, but we had to take action. We had to do the deed. We had to stand there and pump your chest for 20 minutes. We had to operate on you. So this is where it's complex, where free will and power of a single act and all of these things take place. I heard a lecture from my hero recently, Dr. Juvanandan, who is the heart transplant surgeon, Indian man, who's world famous now. He's transplanted over 1,500 people, including his wife. And I had the pleasure of being invited to his lecture because they just honored him at the University of Chicago Medicine. And he follows one holy Indian man called Sai Baba in India. And he went through how the 5 lessons that Sai Baba taught him have influenced his life. And the first lesson was, which I found very interesting, was that you control your actions, but God determines the outcome. And the second thing that he said, which really struck me, which is right in line with the power of a single act, is that he said, hands that serve are holier than lips that pray. So I talk about this in the book. It's kind of funny, the similarities there, because I talk about how our prayers sometimes hang in midair until we take action and do something about it. I think prayer is a wonderful thing, but if we don't follow with action or the power of a single act, I'm not so sure really how much value they have in serving others. It's in doing the act, doing the deed, when we serve others and get our own ego out of the way, that we really spread the light.
That's beautifully said. And we probably could just end right there. And probably should. I'll say one comment, and that is you got up every morning with your pen, with your computer, and you wrote. And that was you doing the work to honor the directive that you'd been given. You did it.
Yeah. Yep. For 3 hours every morning, um, sick or healthy, Maria having seizures or not, I carved out that time from 4:30 to 7:30. And it took 3 years, but the message arrived today, and I'm so delighted.
Me too. We have a question in the chat. Do you want to take it? Do you want to take a question?
Absolutely, I'd love to.
All right,
Sure.
let's read the question. It said, could he comment on how his experience compares with what others have reported from their near-death experience?
That's a good question. I could answer it this way. So when I had my near-death experience, my wife cautioned me, and Rhonda did too, actually. When I met her in Utah at the Richard Paul Evans writing conference, um, she said, whatever you do, don't read any other near-death experience books. Don't put anything in your head. And my wife had told me the same thing. So it was only after I wrote the final manuscript, the raw manuscript, that I began to read other people's experiences. And I have to say, a little bit of cheating here. So, but my wife, because I thought I was going crazy, but my wife, at the same time that I was writing the book, which over a 3-year period, she decided to start reading near-death experience books. And I would share some of my writings with her only after Rhonda and I got through them. So, but I would share some of my writings with her, and she would say, "Oh my God, Rob, I can't even believe that your experience matched this person's." And I said, "Wow, I'm glad I'm not going crazy." So each kind of step of the way, these different stages, I would share things with her, and she would hold off until that was down on paper, until she said, "You know what? I read about this person. They had a very similar experience." So what I've come to understand really is that while all of us have a different near-death experience, God shows up in very different ways to everybody, just like we all have special gifts that we're supposed to express while we're here, no different, because we're all important, we all matter, and everyone has a gift. And so God shows us, different ways of expression. And I learned that there are similarities to some of the near-death experiences. Having been raised Catholic, when I came back from my second near-death experience, and I've told Rhonda about this, I was very upset that I didn't see Jesus Christ. I didn't see a spiritual being. I didn't see God. I didn't see any of those things. God was expressed through concepts like, I am omnipotent, I am your true identity. This is the source of power, things like that. And then I was shown examples while I was in that place about judgment. I got to see my beautiful special needs daughter whole and perfect and radiant. Things like that I was shown. But I did not hear things as we hear things. There was no taste or smell or touch there. So, some people said that they hear music, they smell flowers, all these different things. So I think that while there are similarities, we do have differences. Yeah.
Yeah. In your first near-death experience, you also had a person come to you. A lot of people have someone greet them on the other side, and that was something that happened to you as well.
Yes. Um,
I'm looking at the questions here. There's one more question. Let's see. So I'll read it aloud and we'll see. When my grandmother left her body, she came to me and woke me from sleep. I felt a coolness sweep across my body. How might you describe this from your experience? I accept it as it happened, but perhaps you might share your experience, share what your experience might have been. So, from what I understand from the question, when her grandmother left her body, um, she came and woke from her sleep. So, okay, she was awakened from a sleep when her grandmother left her body. Interesting. Um, so, and
Mhm.
she felt a physical sensation, a coolness. Um, you didn't go see anybody, or nobody necessarily noticed that you were gone, or anything like that that was similar.
No, the the only the only way that I can relate to that is right before my mother died, she saw her brother who had passed away, and I talk about this in the book. Her brother who had passed away a couple of weeks prior, and my mother wasn't able to talk for. She lost her speech for a year, and then all of a sudden, just a couple of weeks before she died, I was in her room with her, and out of nowhere, she started staring at the wall, and she just perked up and looked at the wall, and she said, "Oh, it's my brother Ernest. He's so happy." And it was the last thing that she said. She died a couple of weeks later, but I jumped up off the bed, and I ran over to the wall thinking it was some kind of portal or something. And I started, caressing the wall and saying, "Mom, is he in here? Who else is with him? What else do you see?" And that's all she said. So I can certainly understand your feeling of that sensation because I believe it 100%.
Yeah.
The
Something
spirit
else
speaks to
you
us.
something else that you experienced in the first one was seeing what was going on around you. I mean, being in the room and watching the doctor work on you and your wife praying, and that was, I don't know how many other people have that experience. Some certainly do.
Some do, yes. Some actually, are able to. That happened to me on my second experience in Chicago, where when I went into that ethereal place, I could see myself, lying in my bed in my green hospital gown, and I was green too, all atrophied and shriveled up, and the pumping my heart, and then can also see myself standing in that place in the middle of nowhere, looking perfectly whole, and just kind of looking around like, what is this? But yeah, and then I had that experience where I saw some of my nurses coming in and out of the room, and had that profound moment of seeing their life story flash before me, which was incredible.
Do you want to take one more question and then we'll wrap it up? Are you okay with one more?
Sure.
All right. Can you comment on the subject of evil? We are all perfect, but can you comment on what we here on earth call good and what we call evil?
Hmm. Well, that's a tough question. I guess, are you asking me if evil is real? Because if that's part of the question, yes, the darkness is real. I'm going to share, Rhonda, real quick, if I have time.
You do.
I'm going to share a very important uh, part of my dark night of the soul. There's a chapter in the book entitled "The Darkness," and part of that story was when I was living in Los Angeles and I was traveling a lot. I got on a plane from Los Angeles to fly up to Seattle, Washington, and there was a man that got on the plane, and he came and sat down beside me. And this man had the most weathered face, more so than any Western star that I've ever seen. But his face was very weathered, and he had these deep, deep, deep lines in his face, and reminded me of that novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. And he sat down beside me, and I was shocked to see that once we got in flight, he pulled out a Bible. And he pulled his Bible out and he started highlighting some things and making some notes. And of course, I had to ask him, are you a pastor, or what about your life? And he told me the most horrifying story that I think I've ever heard about how he succumbed to evil and the darkness. And he went down that path, and he let darkness consume him. So this whole concept of evil, darkness, some people say Satan, some people the dark one, whatever it is, I can tell you the darkness is real, it exists, and it's something that we have to be very careful of staying away from. And it's insidious, it sneaks up on us in a lot of different ways. And I talk about that in the book. And I think that one of the ways it sneaks up on us is that when the vicissitudes of life come, and they come to us all, and by the way, I have fallen prey to this with my daughter. I had a very difficult relationship with the Creator at one point, blamed God for everything, my daughter's condition, my failures, everything else in life. And when we start to do that, then we begin to look at different vices to hide those feelings and that fear. One thing leads to another, and before we know it, we're stumbling around in the dark. We've lost our moral compass. We don't know who we are anymore, and we can get involved in some crazy things. Thank goodness I met this pastor on the plane before I got into any kind of uh, dark worshiping, because he stopped me cold. Because after hearing his experience, which you'll read about in the book, I was snapped out of it. But I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure that it does entirely, but
I think that was an excellent answer, actually, and would encourage people to read it because it, it is a difficult question about the darkness, and we want to focus on the light, but recognizing that there are opposites in this world as well.
sure, absolutely, yeah.
Well, you've had a big day, and just delighted that you took some time with us. The timing of this coming out during Roots Tech seemed poignant so that we could share it with more people. I'm going to go ahead and share the replay of this. I would make an ask now. If any of you have not purchased Rob's book, please do so. It's 99 cents today. If you watch the replay, I don't know how long it'll be 99 cents, but purchase it because not only will it change your life, I mean, it really will change your perspective and bring more light into your life, but it helps his book rankings, and we're looking for an international bestseller status, and every purchase counts. So please go out and buy Rob's book. You won't be sorry.
Thank you for that, Rhonda, and I really appreciate the questions and everyone who joined. It's been lovely.
Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up soon, Rob.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Yeah.